Gluttony is not what causes food addiction. Gluttony is a description of the behavior of overeating in a way that harms the body, but it's not what causes food addiction. What causes food addiction is something much deeper, and it's a sin that's reflective of a heart level issue that shows up as this behavior level problem, like gluttony, like over consuming food in a way that harms the body. But the problem with Christians is we are so focused on behavior change. We are so focused on works-based religion, on being able to appease God by doing better, that when we look at the problem of fat and must be spiritual, we're thinking gluttony, 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 gluttony. I've got to stop being gluttonous. And that's exactly what the enemy wants you to do, because if you're focused on the gluttony, you're distracted from addressing the heart level issue that triggers you into gluttony in the first place. And this is works-based religion versus grace-based sanctification. Works-based religion focuses on the sin and stopping the sin and behaving your way into being able to appease God. Grace-based sanctification takes view of God's mercy and love and His supernatural grace, and that grace is what energizes consistent obedience and godly living. So I'm not saying that gluttony doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. It absolutely is sin. Proverbs 23:2 says, "And put a knife to your throat if you've been given to gluttony." We're supposed to address gluttony with the same attitude that Jesus recommends when He says, if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. If your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. David says, if you've been given a gluttony, take a knife and stab yourself in the neck to stop that food in its path from being able to enter your body and cause harm. Gluttony is serious, but to be free from gluttony, we need to look much deeper. And when does this progress from gluttony and or moments of gluttony to full-on food addiction? Because addiction is different. Addiction is when you willingly engage in behaviors that you know cause you harm. And food addiction is one of the biggest silent killers in the United States. It's the one that nobody talks about. It's the one that if you address it, or you address the impacts of it, people feel personally offended. It's taboo. You don't look at your fat pastor and say, hey pastor, I care about you, I love you. I think you've got a problem with food. And sure, in the men's Bible study, guys are gonna confess other things like doubting that their children will be saved, or not reading their Bible as much as they should. But when it comes to gluttony, when it comes to overeating in a way that harms the body, they'll joke about it. You see, food addiction is one of the areas, especially in the Christian world, where the enemy really has his grip, because it objectively kills 75+% of Christians early. That's how many Christians are overweight or obese. Meaning, clinically speaking, on their death certificate, their weight is going to have been medically considered one of the primary comorbidities. So this overeating, it kills us all early, and we joke about it. And it's addressed specifically in the Bible. But when this becomes an addiction, when it's an addiction, there's something way deeper going on. Because a food addiction means you know it causes you harm. You have no plausible deniability. You know it's bad and you know you need to stop, but you do it anyway. You can't stop overeating. You might have even reached the point where it's become a spiritual conviction, where you want to honor the temple of God, where you know you're turning to food for comfort instead of turning to the Holy Spirit for comfort. But just like clockwork, you can get to the end of the night and you might have had a hard day at work or a argument with your wife, and next thing you know, while everybody else is going to sleep, you find yourself in the pantry looking for something to eat. The question is, what is a sin that doesn't just cause a moment of gluttony, but an actual ingrained, repeated food addiction? To make this clear, I'm going to take you to a moment where I've been to, and that is the morning after you've just binge eaten. And it's where you're looking in the mirror with your shirt off, about to brush your teeth, and you see that fat spilling over, you see the fat surrounding your chest, and you think to yourself, I am such a fat piece of Sorry for all the Christians who are better than me, who are just scared away, but that is the honest thought that ran through my head, and that probably has run through yours. And the sin isn't in thinking that way about yourself. The sin is when you come into agreement with that perception of who you are. Because here's what the enemy does in that moment. When he hears you say that to yourself, he comes creeping in like the accuser he is, and he says, you know what, you're right. He points to that excess fat around your waistline. He points to the potentially years of repeated failure that you've had in the effort of losing the weight and keeping it off. And he uses that as tangible evidence to accuse you of being someone who is different than who God says you are. And when you come into agreement with that, when you say, you know what, I'm disgusting, I'm such a fat piece of shit, I'll never solve this problem. That's where we have sinned. That's where we have fallen short. That's where we have lived out of alignment with who God created us to be. Because in that moment, we're saying we have more faith in who the enemy says we are than in who God says we are. In that moment, we are reading the first chapter of Genesis where it says that we are made in his image, and we're saying, you know what? Liar. I'm not made in his image. I am disgusting, incapable, too far gone. I'll probably always be this way. You know what? This isn't even that bad as long as I provide well and go to church on Sunday. And now the enemy's got you. And you've not just justified it, but you have opened yourself up to an even more vicious cycle of overeating, an even more vicious food addiction. And you can do the math right now. Because if you've tried to lose weight and gained it back and gained a little bit more back every single time, if this continues to compound at some point, mathematically speaking, you are going to be Jabba the Hutt. And although that scares the freaking crap out of you, you're looking around at the rest of the world thinking, you know what? It ain't so bad. This is just what happens to everyone. And that is the point in which you have sinned. And I don't say that to condemn you. I'm highlighting the fact that it is a serious matter when we look at our circumstance and we come into agreement about what the enemy says of our circumstance. It is a serious matter, and it is ungodly to view ourselves in any way that's contrary to how God sees us. Not to mention how it is ungodly to go to anything else for comfort when we should be going to the Holy Spirit for comfort. And not to mention how it is ungodly to be gluttonous, to overeat in a way that harms the body. It's not just the overeating. There is always something so much deeper that's triggering the overeating. So when you're in this battle, do not just think to yourself, gluttony, gluttony, gluttony. If I can just stop myself from being gluttonous and have enough discipline and enough willpower, and you know what, maybe I should listen literally to Proverbs 23:2 and stab myself in the neck if I've been given a gluttony. Just remember that is not going to solve the root cause problem. And even though it is wise to remove all stumbling blocks and to have an attitude in which you are willing to do whatever's necessary to remove yourself from the ability to exercise that sin, you need to ask yourself what is triggering the overeating in the first place. Because if you don't address that, sure, you're gonna have spurts of discipline and you're gonna have spurts of losing the weight and spurts of feeling like, you know what, I got this, I'm all good, I'm clear. But if you're not addressing the root, that sin is gonna come crouching at your door. It's gonna rear its ugly head in a moment where you're stressed or where life feels like it's falling apart. And that wiring of your brain is going to be screaming at you. It's going to be saying, remember food, remember the food. It makes you feel so good. You can just go back to the food and you'll feel good for a moment and you'll know it. And so this matters not just through the lens of your physical health. That's not the only area in which we need to see ourselves the way God sees us. This applies to everything else. Because if you're facing a stressful business season and you're looking at the evidence of that circumstance and it's causing you stress and it's making you feel like you're a failure, like you can't handle it all, those negative emotions can trigger you to overeat. If you're going through a hardship in your marriage and you're thinking, you know what, my wife doesn't love me, God tricked me when he told me to marry her, those negative emotions can trigger you to overeat. And so it is imperative in all circumstances, including that moment where you are looking in the mirror, seeing the excess fat around your waistline, it's imperative that you see yourself the way God sees you. Remember, even if you've been given to gluttony, you are not a glutton. Remember, even if you've eaten and gotten fat, you are not a fat piece of. Remember, even if right now your body is not the best representation of the God that you claim to worship, remember the God who you worship is the Redeemer. He's the one who says you are never too far gone. He's the one who says he made you in his image. He's the one who wants to use the victory he's giving you in this area of life as a testimony to his goodness. He's the one who says you were given the spirit of self-control. It's not something you have to strive for or fight for or work your nose into the grindstone to attain. It's something that dwells within you that you have to accept. It's who you are because of whose you are. So remember, it's not gluttony that causes your food addiction. It's something much deeper. And if we can bring this to the Holy Spirit, He'll create the healing. I hope this blesses you. See you in the next one.